So everybody knows Charles Darwin as the man whose ideas laid the foundation for the theory of evolution. What you may not know is that this man really wrestled with whether or not he should marry.
Will you marry me?
Now, my producer has found his personal journal, not his scientific journal, like this was his kind of personal diary. And on 2 pages, he has a question at the top. It says, the question. And then it says on one side, to marry. And then on the other side, it says, not marry. So what are the pros and cons? These are the pros and cons, according to Charles Darwin, as to whether or not he should marry. I have not seen this. I have not looked at this at all. I'm going to just jump right in and see what we got here. In the marry column, he says, children, that's a pro, right? Children, if it please God. In the not marry column, freedom to go where one likes to go. Isn't this interesting? You know, in our world today, we cling to freedom. I love this line from St. John Paul II, his book, Love and Responsibility. He says, freedom is the means and love is the end. If we're honest with ourselves, he says, we desire love more than we desire freedom.
What will you do without freedom?
Freedom is meant to be spent for the sake of love. But here we see in Charles Darwin, he's wrestling with this idea, should I spend my freedom on love or should I hold on to my freedom so I can go wherever I want to go? Okay, number 2 in the pro column, constant companion and friend in old age. Nobody wants to grow up and be lonely. Who will feel interested in you, right? An object to be beloved and played with, better than a dog. Yeah, I'd like to suggest that having a wife would be better than having a dog. I'm not exactly sure where Darwin was going with that. We know in our world today we have a lot of people who are afraid of children and, you know, they will get pets instead. Maybe he's saying, I could have a companion as a pet, but a human would be better, and I would agree.
Amen to that, Scotty.
All right, in the con column, not to marry, not forced to visit relatives, and to bend in every trifle. Apparently, I don't know, maybe Darwin had some bad experiences with friends who didn't get along with their in-laws. That's what it sounds like to me. And bending in every trifle, maybe he had kind of a stubborn will and wasn't interested in compromise. All right, back to the pro column, the marry column. Home, I would have a home, I assume he's saying, and someone to take care of the house. He's writing this in the 1800s. I don't know how well that would go over in the 21st century, this idea that it seems that he's assuming that the woman is going to be taking care of the house. Maybe you've seen some of these videos on YouTube where women are posting that they want to be the traditional wife, you know, go back to the 1950s and do all the cooking and cleaning. And, you know, I understand the backlash against some of the exaggerations that we've entered into in the 21st century, but we've also made some progress, and maybe I was about to say we've gotten over some of the stereotypes of certain roles that men and women play, but so much of the gender ideology just reinforces the stereotypes, right? If you are a guy and you like things that are stereotypically feminine, well, you're not allowed to like that because you're a guy, so you actually must be a woman. Or vice versa. If you're a gal who happens to like things that are stereotypically masculine, that doesn't mean you're just a gal who likes things that are stereotypically masculine. We're actually cementing these stereotypes by saying to these people, no, that's an indication that you must be a guy. No, not buying it. Not to marry. Oh, dear. To have the expense and anxiety of children. Although what I was laughing at was the next one. Fatness and idleness. That was the one that caught my funny bone. He doesn't want to marry either because, what, is he worried about him getting fat and being idle? Or is he worried about his wife getting fat and being idle? I don't know, Darwin, where you're going with that one. Okay, to marry. Charms of music and female chit-chat. These things are good for one's health, but a terrible loss of time. This guy seemed rather busy. Maybe he didn't like to waste time. In my better times, in my better moments, wasting time is one of my favorite things to do. And it's not a waste to waste time. It's one of the most fruitful things you can do. Waste time with people. We live in such a production-oriented society that we think I'm only worth something if I'm doing. You are not a human doing, you are a human being. So let's learn how to be human beings and not just human doings. That's kind of my train of thought, thinking about him getting worried about wasting his time with a spouse. This is in the not to marry column. Anxiety and responsibility. Yes. There are anxieties that go along with responsibilities. But again, I'd put this in the column of spending your freedom, right? It is better to spend your freedom than to hold on to it. In spending your freedom on love, there is without a doubt responsibilities that come with that. And with those responsibilities, there can be anxiety. So I know what he's wrestling with, but I'm going to say it's worth it. Love is worth it. Okay, and then here is his final in the plus column, why one should marry. My God, it is intolerable to think of spending one's whole life like a neuter or castrated bee, working, and nothing after all. Imagine living all one's days solitarily in smoky, dirty London house. Only picture to yourself a nice soft wife on a sofa with a good fire and books and music, perhaps. A nice soft wife.
It's so soft.
It is soft.
Oh, well, yeah. Who's going to argue with the comfort of feminine softness? Absolutely. I'm with you, Darwin. It's a good thing. And the anxiety and responsibility that comes with it and the raising of the children and all that stuff, go for it. I mean, Darwin's long gone, but whoever's listening, if you're in Darwin's place, go for it. Okay, last one in the not to marry, the con column for marriage. He says, if one were to have many children, one would be forced to gain one's bread, meaning you have to work to provide for those children's stomachs to be fed, right? But then it's very bad for one's health to work too much, he says. Yes, but it's even worse for your health not to learn how to love. That would be my argument. But then apparently he makes a decision. On the next page of his journal, which I have here, he says, the top of the page reads, it being proved necessary to marry. So he thinks that his con column has not done a good job in disproving the pro column. He's going for the pro column. When, he says, sooner or later, ? He goes on to write, soon, for otherwise it would be bad if one has children, one's character is more flexible. I assume he's saying that when you're young, your character is more flexible. I've certainly seen that. People who get married later in life, I think they would probably be the first to admit that they're kind of set in their ways, right? If they're getting married in their 40s or 50s, they've had a lot more life to themselves and kind of get set in their ways, and that can be a particular challenge to adjust to living with somebody else, including the addition of children, which is another level altogether. So I think he's on to something there. One's feelings are more lively when you're younger. If one does not marry soon, one misses so much good and pure happiness.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. Ain't it the truth? There is much, much joy to be had in married life. The joys and the trials go together. The agonies and the ecstasies go together. And it's written right into the vows, isn't it? We promise to love one another in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for richer, for poorer, for good reason. We could just as well say for the agonies and the ecstasies, the sorrows and the joys, right? The trials and the triumphs. But how should I manage all my business, he says, if I were obliged to go every day walking with my wife? He said, I would never know French or see the continent or go to America or go up in a balloon or take solitary trip in Wales. You will be worse than a slave. Man, he's still really wrestling. Do I spend my freedom or do I cling to it? Remember this, those out there discerning, remember this. we desire love more than freedom, right? Clinging to your freedom and refusing to give it away in love, it's like having $1 million in your bank account, but never doing anything with it.
Didn't think your mom and dad would leave you with nothing now, did you?
We want to have some sense of security, but true security comes in spending our freedom on love. All right, he concludes, never mind, my boy, cheer up. Ha-ha. He's drawing the very same conclusion that I just drew. He says, one cannot live this solitary life with groggy old age, friendless and cold, and childless, staring at one's own face, already beginning to wrinkle. Never mind, trust to chance, keep a sharp lookout. There is many a happy slave. Isn't that interesting? Here, I think we can talk about, rather than slavery, I would talk about the commitment of love, right? If one is a slave, one is there against his will. But if one has committed himself to marriage, he's committed himself or herself freely with his or her will. In fact, if you are not there freely, it's not a valid marriage. The very first thing the priest will ask a couple at a Catholic wedding is, have you come here freely? To give yourself without reservation to each other, or to give yourself wholeheartedly. That's that spending of freedom. I've been married for, well, we got married in 1995. You do the math. A long time. And I have never made a better decision with my freedom than to spend it on marriage. And not just marriage in the abstract. We don't get married abstractly. I have never made a better decision than to spend my freedom on Wendy. And from Wendy, the 5 children that have been the fruit of our love. Be not afraid to make the total gift of yourself. Be not afraid to spend your freedom. Darwin had some interesting nuggets there. Wrestling like we all wrestle, but in the end, I think he saw the wisdom of spending his freedom.